Now, heading into this transfer window, I and just about every other Arsenal fan said that we needed ourselves a world-class midfielder. Whether that be a normal central midfielder to allow Declan Rice to play as the holding midfielder full-time, or, and in my preferred option, we get a world-class holding midfielder to allow Declan Rice to play in his best position, in my opinion, that being the 8 or the box-to-box role. And in my shortlist of guys we could have got this summer, my number one guy going into this transfer window, and I made a video about it, and I guess he still is my first choice number one for Arsenal to get, that being the 26-year-old from Newcastle United in Bruno Guimaraes, someone we were linked with back in his Olympic Lyon days. But in recent weeks, and more so even recent days, tons of reports all over have come in that Arsenal want to get 28-year-old from Real Sociedad in Mikel Merino. And this move, if the reports are true, has taken me by surprise, because quite frankly, Merino wasn't and isn't in my top 3 targets we should get in midfield, and quite honestly, he isn't even the number 1 target in Real Sociedad for our midfield, with me preferring Martin Zubimendi instead of Mikel Merino. Now, believe it or not, I'm quite familiar with Mikel Merino's game. I follow La Liga quite hectically, so I'm very familiar with his game, and I certainly see reasons why Arsenal would want Mikel Merino, but I would also just prefer someone like Guimaraes or Zubimendi instead of Merino. So why exactly are Arsenal so interested in Mikel Merino? What can he bring to our midfield? How much should we look to pay for him? And what role will he play in our midfield and our squad? Well, that's what we'll be talking about today. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Gunner Central here. I hope you're all doing well. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Now, I started properly knowing about Mikel Merino in 2017 when Borussia Dortmund loaned him out to Newcastle United, where he would play out on loan for 6 months, having some pretty decent performances, and then see Newcastle United make the move permanent, only to then sell him 6 months later to Real Sociedad for a reported £10.6 million in 2018. Mikel Merino, who was a teammate of both Martin Odegaard and Kieran Tierney during their stints at Sociedad, Mikel Merino has been an ever-present for Real Sociedad in their midfield, having played a massive 242 games for Real Sociedad, scoring 27 goals and getting 30 assists for the club during his 6-year stay. Last season, Mikel Merino had yet another good season at Real Sociedad, playing 45 games, scoring 8 times and getting 5 assists, seeing himself get 2 goals and 1 assist in the first time he's ever played Champions League football. Now, Mikel Merino's game is much more of a standard central midfielder as opposed to a defensive midfielder, meaning that if Arsenal do get Mikel Merino from Real Sociedad, then you would expect Merino to start alongside Odegaard, seeing Declan Rice drop into the 6th position, which in my eyes isn't ideal. I'd much prefer to see Declan as an 8, with a world-class number 6 behind Declan and Martin Odegaard. Now, Mikel Merino's game is quite fun to watch. He's very good at what he does. Mikel Merino is quite dynamic in the midfield. Despite playing higher up than a traditional number 6, at times he's so good defensively, you'd swear that he is a number 6. Mikel Merino has a very high defensive awareness, a good football IQ, oftentimes winning tons of duels and being able to intercept passes to quite a high level. His ball recovery ability is absolutely phenomenal. He is also pretty good in the air, standing at 6'2", and he has a decent, though not great, but he has a decent eye for goal, scoring 8 goals last season and scoring a game-winning header against Germany for Spain in the quarterfinals of the Euros that's just passed. He is far from the greatest ball carrier. He isn't necessarily good at ball retention by any stretch of the imagination. Dribbling wise, he's not the greatest player in the world, but Mikel Merino is also a very good and sound passer of the ball and can thread the needle with an inch-perfect pass when need be. Now, Mikel Merino can be very aggressive at times, overly aggressive at times, and this can be a downside of his game. Seeing him collect 14 yellow cards last season in 45 games, that's meaning he got a yellow card every 3rd game he played, which isn't an amazing stat, and at his age you'd expect him and you'd like him to be more disciplined on the defensive end. But overall, if I had to sum up Mikel Merino, well, he's a good and fairly versatile midfielder that is more than capable of holding his own even in the Premier League. Now, is he a world-class midfielder? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. Is he going to move the needle drastically for Arsenal? I don't think so. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think so. But I mean, he is a good midfielder that, according to reports, Arsenal could get for very cheap from Real Sociedad this summer. Merino's contract expires at the end of next season, and Arsenal could reportedly get Mikel Merino, who's valued at 50 million euros by Transfermarkt. We could get him for just 20 million pounds this summer, which is a very good price tag and is much cheaper than someone like Martin Zubimendi or Bruno Guimaraes. This is definitely a huge market opportunity for Arsenal at just 20 million pounds to get someone that is 28 years old in their prime, coming off of a reasonably impressive Euro campaign with Spain. Even though he didn't play a huge amount of minutes, he isn't necessarily injury prone, and he has been a starter at Real Sociedad for the past 6 years. This is a really good price, and I can see why Arsenal want to explore this possibility in the market. I've seen people say that Merino is capable of playing a Xhaka role, and to be honest, this is true. He won't nearly be as effective or as good as Xhaka was in that role. Quite frankly, I don't think many midfielders would be, but he could play that role to a decent enough level. But now, even with the price considered, I don't think this is the move that Arsenal should do. I know with the financial rules now in place, it's difficult to spend as much as we have over the past years, but I can't see why we would get someone who won't drastically improve us when we need to keep up with Man City. I would certainly be behind this transfer if that means that we sell Smith Rowe, which is looking likely, and maybe even if we sell Thomas Partey, because I think Merino could be a very good depth addition into this midfield. As a backup, he is a really high-level backup and will allow guys like Declan Rice to get more rest throughout the season without seeing a huge, significant drop-off in the midfield. So for 20 million pounds for a midfielder in his prime that can play some good rotational minutes, well, I'm fully behind that. But I'm not fully behind the idea of us spending the 20 million pounds and him being our starting midfielder alongside Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard. I just don't think he's quite that level of a player. Honestly, I would love a world-class midfielder and a backup striker. I'd much rather prefer that as opposed to a world-class striker and a backup midfielder. Now, again, if we do make some sales, we become a little bit light in the midfield, well then I really like the addition of Mikel Merino and potentially even getting his fellow teammate Martin Zubimendi. But as good as Merino is, plus the potential price we could get him for, I just don't see why we would choose to get him if he isn't going to only be a rotational player, say like Jorginho. If Mikel Merino comes in and plays the Jorginho role when he plays games when tactically we need him in, or he plays games to just give some rest to our other midfielders, well then I'm fully behind getting him for just 20 million pounds. But I don't think he's the level of player we need to come into this midfield alongside Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard and instantly make us better, instantly make us Premier League title favourites. I just don't think he's that kind of player. Now, what I think we might do is I think we might still get him in as a 20 million pound player, and we might have Thomas Partey as our starting midfielder alongside Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, which if Thomas Partey can stay fit, it's a big if, but if he can stay fit, well then I wouldn't mind this move at all from Arsenal. Again, we get him on a good price and we would allow Thomas Partey to play at CDM with Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, that being our three-man midfield, and then on the bench we'd have the likes of Fabio Vieira, Smith Rowe, he'll probably be sold, so not Smith Rowe, but then you're adding on Jorginho and Mikel Merino into our midfield, well then I think we have good depth and quality depth at that, which is something that is so important in winning a 38-game league season. I just don't see Merino being an out-and-out starter, but I do think that if we are keeping Thomas Partey as our starter alongside Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, well then Mikel Merino is a really good option for 20 million pounds.